Origins, that would be, it just depends on who is actually its publisher, to be honest. Like I said, there's a couple of them out there, like Marvel has I want to say they have an Origins.
Well, I mean, origin is the name of the
Yes.
The book, not of origin of a character. Or something.
No, I understand. That's the book, yes, the book's title, Origins, yeah. I would say that the easiest way on that is to actually look up, I'd have to really cross-reference what title is with what, and when did it actually get issued out.
Yeah, we're talking, I think, early 90s.
Okay. I would say on that, in that particular regard, it would probably hinge on its print run and exposure, that type of thing.
You're going to be at the show in Orlando?
Absolutely. Yep. July 17th. Yep,
If
I'll
I
be there.
can remember.
I'm sure if you come up to my table and ask me about Origins, well, I'll be able to.
What I would do, if I remember, is bring a couple of them with me.
Okay. Cool. Sure.
Let you look at them.
Not a problem. Greetings to the new people in the back. Welcome to the Indie Comics panel. My name is Larry Spike Jarrell. I have my own publishing company under Brass Ring Comics. I'm also the editor-in-chief and an art director for Second Sight Publishing, editor-in-chief for Freedom Verse, and the Second Verse, two imprints that we use for fantasy and sci-fi, and the other one is our hero books. At my table, I have my book Lady Freedom that is part of that particular universe and going forward. Shameless plug number one, all titles in store, 8/5, check your local listing. So this is the Indie Comics panel. We'll go right into it. Like, if anyone is familiar with Indie Comics or what's referred to as Indie Comics, is anything not Marvel and DC. Though they're starting to take away that title from companies or publishers like Boom, Image, Dynamite, Aspen, because there's been around long enough that they've established themselves. Dark Horse is another one, IDW. They're not really the independent moniker anymore because they have a larger catalog. They have
part of the establishment.
Yeah, you could go with their part of the comics mainstream stuff. They produce eclectic titles. Generally, most independent books that are really truly part of that brand are something that everybody calls creator-owned. And that has been around only really since the early 90s. But independent books got their start in the early to, actually, and I had to recorrect, I said early to mid to late 80s. It's actually the early 80s, and a lot of it was a big push with black and white. And those independent publishers were Comico, and Dark Horse was one of the early ones, First Comics, Eagle, and the list goes on. But if it's not Marvel and DC, the loose interpretation is that it's an indie comic. Anybody have any questions to get it started in any particular direction for you guys? Okay. Yes? No? Well, it's kind of, let's see, where to start. There was in the early 90s when indies really started to take off, was a big push from Image Comics. They got everybody into things like Youngblood, Wildcats, Savage Dragon, and so on. They really started getting everybody interested in something not Marvel, not Spider-Man, not Batman, not Superman, but something different, yet somewhat familiar to them. And that has kind of also occurred through other creators out there who have done their own spin. Namely, I can give you from my own personal reference, I decided to do my own take on Captain America, which I call Lady Freedom. It's a very similar story in certain regards because it's recognizable to fans who are familiar with Captain America. In this instance, she's a Native American, U.S. Army volunteer. She volunteers for a secret program and becomes a superhero, well, loosely. At first, she's just another big blunt instrument for the military to use as a deterrent in things like the original plan for Captain America. He's a weapon. And it is, as the story will progress, she becomes more of a symbol to the country, much like Captain America. My take is that with her being Native American, she's a little more actual part of the country, and just a little bit of a dip to my own personal heritage of being quarter Cherokee. So she's Cherokee Indian, and full-on volunteer kind of thing. And she's got a lot of friends that are with her in this, and allies that are joined and are part of the team. But it's just something that will catch on because people are familiar with that story. And that's what's happened, I guess, with a lot of creator-owned and a lot of indie books out there, is that we've tried to capture a similar feel so that readers would be able to climb on board and say, oh, I like this character, reminds me of this, and I like that story, so let me see what this one is about. Let me see what this take is. The other side, there's been a lot of, it's kind of hard, where to go with this? It's kind of, man, I had a whole agenda prepared.
You gotta write down. That's what I make sure
Well,
you do.
it's not so much that, it's more that it was,
Well, if you're winging it, you're doing a pretty good job of it.
well, it's kind of it, because most of the panels people will ask, hey.
I mean, you mentioned Dark Horse Comics, and that rang a bell with me. And here's one of the ones that I happen to have stashed at home.
Oh, The American. Okay. Yeah, that's one of their early books.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had a lot of things. They also, with being independent, they also did a lot of marketing. They reached out to a lot of different things like Aliens, the Aliens franchise, Predator. But a lot of those books actually got their start in black and white before they really delved into color. Actually, a good break into certain things with indies. Everyone knows who Captain Marvel is from Marvel, right? Okay.
The latest version, Carol Danvers and all that. Yeah.
Carol Danvers is really, but she's really not Carol Danvers. She's,
she's
not that. The original incarnation actually was a character called Miracle Man, and was swiped, and there was a big legal contention going on with that, and they finally won the rights to actually call it Captain Marvel. There was a lot more to it than that, but that was the original incarnation, was Miracle Man, and the story was a lot darker, a little more gritty, a lot less sunshine and rainbows that was portrayed in the Captain Marvel books in Marvel. And it had its own fan following. It really dwindled because of the popularity wasn't there, the circulation wasn't there. You know what? That kind of trends towards something. A lot of people know in comics about in dealing with distribution and your local comic book stores. They're probably the biggest source of getting things for an indie collector. Like, are you guys more mainstream or more indie related?
I mean, I follow my friend Fat Man Comics,
Okay.
And that's about the only comics I've been collecting lately.
But that's,
And he's
No,
an
I've kind of
indie.
stepped back from it over the years. I've just thought that with this con and you being in here, that I might just get interested in it again. But I haven't really bought any comics for quite a long time.
well, one of the things I think we'll transition to is in that regard of like getting into comics. With this pandemic, a lot of the big companies, the really large companies, that being Marvel, DC, and other Image, IDW, that have all these different things like Transformers and G.I. Joe and stuff that people will recognize, even most of the anime books or manga, is been on hiatus because there's no print house to get them out and no distribution from, say, to your local comic shops. So a lot of independent creators, like myself, have been able to get stuff into stores that were willing to take a chance because they had no new product. So it's actually created, oddly enough, and I don't really want to call it a positive because it is a pandemic, it's become a more, people have opened their eyes to other stories, other characters, other things to read, see, and take in. So in that instance, it's become a boon to more indie creators to get the word out on their books and get people exposed to it, which draws people who have been turned off, let's say, to the stagnant storylines and have become mostly uninteresting characters in mainstream. You know, the stories that don't appeal like for Batman or Superman or Spider-Man or whatever, and they're wanting something more unique that they can get on board with in the original at the very beginning, rather than try to go look for a $500 key comic to see the first appearance of a character. They can get on board for $3.99 or $4.99 at a local shop that now carries all of these because they're the only new thing being produced. So in that way, kind of helping to get people more back into enjoying the stories that are out there. And there's thousands of indie creators like us, like myself, that are out there that really could benefit from getting a shot. You know, you never know what you will come across. And there's a lot of, I can cover a couple of stories that I know of. Second Sight is actually where I'm working as the art director and whatnot for them. We've got a series of books that are getting ready to come out. Cult of Dracula. No one knows this person's name. His name is Richard Davis. He's a comic shop owner, but he's also a very accomplished writer. His story, Cult of Dracula, is a new spin on an old story that you're familiar with, but it's a whole new view of it, if you will, of that story. The characters' names you'll recognize: Brom, Jonathan Harker, Lucy, Mina, just all of Dr. Von Helsing, just all of those characters are there, but they're different. And it's a more modern setting. I've already talked about Lady Freedom. And then we have two excellent, very excellent sci-fi books that are getting ready to come out. Book of Lyaxia, to start with. It's a new reimagining of your favorite deities, if you will. Greek gods, Roman gods, Norse gods. Different kinds of, it's a different scenario. And it focuses on two brothers that are having to deal with the contentious issues between their family lines. And another one which I'm actually excited to read myself, not that I'm not excited to read Book of Lyaxia, but Duplicant is one that I'm looking forward to. I've always been a big fan of sci-fi, cyberpunk, dystopian kind of stories that are done really well. Duplicant is going to be a very good book. It's the meat of the story is that in the future, slightly forward from here, people were able to generate body parts. And it's the interaction of the characters directly involved with that are setting the stage. And it's, I don't want to give away too much other than it's something that if you like sci-fi, fantasy, that type of thing, you definitely want to watch out for Duplicate. It's going to be hot. For people who are collectors, we try not to do a lot of those crazy variants that are out there that everybody buys. Are you guys collectors at all? Readers? Just readers?
Yeah.
It's okay, you can talk. It's okay.
Not of comics, but I used to collect miniatures, and then there would be like 16 versions of the same
Exactly.
casting.
And for people who collect comics or that, they'll do a lot of varying covers. Virgin covers, one in this, all kinds of different options. And that's originally a marketing technique to get retailers to buy more books, rather than necessarily. Now it's actually caught on to the point to where it's more about the art, less intrusion of lettering on covers, more simplified logos, smaller imprints. Perfect example, like when DC went to that small D that just was weird looking, that was just a D on the cover. Everybody is getting away from that and getting into more of the art. That's another aspect of it. A lot of indie books introduced the world of comics to all of the varying artists. A perfect example, a gentleman who is doing something for us, Chris Callahan, did a cover for a book from Frank Gogol named No Heroine. And his cover was extremely well received. Everybody really loved his artwork. So it started to really gain in popularity. And he's doing a cover for us for one of the books called The Dracula. If you like horror, we are going to have a pretty solid horror line starting with the Cult of Dracula for Second Sight. It's kind of, there's not, without a lot of questions, it's kind of hard to press on. Not that I don't want to keep talking, but I guess I can wrap up because I know that there's another panel coming in very soon. If anybody wants to, they can stop by the table. I'll be happy to. I'm in the vendor's room in there. I'll be able to cover a lot of other things or more in-depth, direct conversations with everybody. And anybody who has questions can obviously hit us up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram.
What's your handles?
Second Sight Publishing, at Second Sight Publishing on Twitter, or not on Twitter, on Instagram. Second Sight Studios, LLC on Facebook, brassringcomics.com, secondsightpublishing.com, and my personal one on Instagram is at BRCEIC, Brass Ring Comics Editor-in-Chief. And again, I thank you guys for coming in. I realize we have a tiny crowd, but again, if anybody, just as much as a personal touch, come on by my table. We're happy to talk.
Yay! Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.